meet echo a totally new meaning because you have a strong echo to what you are saying.
That's nice.
So like you are preaching from a large church.
Good reverb, huh? And part of that's this room is just incredibly live, but people are joining. We'll start in a couple of minutes. Now it looks like the join rate is starting to slow down. There are a couple of people that I was expecting would be here that are not here yet. I'll drag my feet for just a moment more. All right, we'll go ahead and jump in. As usual for these calls, remember that the session is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube. If you are willing, please share your video. Let's make this as much of a people around the room having a meeting around a table as we can make it. Hopefully people have had a chance to start through the notes. The link to the notes page is in the meeting materials at the data tracker. I'm going to rearrange my windows here. Apologies for the short delay. I think this will make for a better experience for people. Does anyone have any bashes to the agenda as listed on the notes page? Are there any topics that we need to add that are not already reflected there? All right. So I've organized this as before into topics that I think will need discussion and then things that are there mostly for reporting purposes. The first topic I have for discussion is we are planning to shift DNS from being served from AMS's infrastructure onto Cloudflare mid to late January. This will be a fairly disruptive transition to the technology that we're using. I suspect that it will mean an unpopular set of steps that we go through with DNSSEC. In particular, we will probably go for a day with our zone not signed at all. This is the recommendation that we've gotten from several community members. It lines up with the recommendations at Cloudflare, but there are I know a lot of people that work inside the IETF on DNSSEC that will be very unhappy that we go through a period where we aren't maintaining a signature chain back to what we've had in the past. I haven't picked a date for this. I think a lot of that's going to depend on what we learn when we start into the first steps of setup. So I'd like to leave this right now with a probably third or fourth week in January timeframe, with a plan to send an announcement to the community if it turns out that it looks like we're going to do anything terribly disruptive, or maybe the going some time without DNSSEC is something we want to announce, or maybe we don't want to announce it. This is up for discussion. Anybody have any thoughts on the matter?
I think everything, sorry for the video, once again, Miteco doesn't want my video. It should be announced, right? Because it's quite a big change, even if for one day. And a second question, Robert, does it mean that all the DNS servers, I mean the primary and the secondaries, will be Cloudflare properties?
I missed the last part of your sentence. After
Okay,
primary
so
and secondary
will be
servers.
all the server based in the NS record, right? Will only be Cloudflare property servers, right?
We should have the ability to continue to use the people that are serving secondary for us. This is
Thank
one of
you.
the that the documentation indicates should be supported. We won't know for sure until we get in and attempt the configuration, but it is currently our plan to continue to take advantage of the volunteer secondary server layer that we have at the moment.
Thank you. Important.
Unless someone has other questions on this, I'll move on. So we have, as you know, contracted with Sirius Open Source to act as a set of virtual database administrators for us with the Postgres database in particular, but all of the database engines that we're using. Between the last time we talked and this time, we've asked Sirius to take a more hands-on approach, actually giving them access to the machines directly, asking them to configure the Postgres engine directly and set up a different and more comprehensive backup and high availability strategy. This is being prototyped on the sandbox right now. We expect that we'll have it deployed on IETFA before the month is over, certainly in the first part of January. It's hindered a little bit by the choices that OpenSUSE has made for packaging for 15.3 and 15.4, which we'll talk about the upgrades to that next. There are a lot of utilities that we need to be able to use, like PG Loader, that are not packaged and don't install well from the experimental packages that are available at OpenSUSE. We're going to work around it for the short term with Docker for PG Loader, and we're just falling back to a closer to the base package set of tools for setting up our incremental backup strategy. When we go through our IT infrastructure revision process, we'll move on to services where we can move to stronger tools like PG Backrest, and Sirius is doing the preparation work to make those moves when we have the resources available to make them. So the big takeaway here is that we've got more people and more contracted people working directly with what had to date been something that only Glenn would do. The number of people with root on the IETFA server in particular is different than what it was a month ago. Anybody have any questions? Michael, thanks for joining us and sharing video. Glad to see you. All right. The next thing that I wanted to walk through was our plan for upgrading the IETF servers point version for the operating systems that are currently running OpenSUSE, which we mentioned before. Much of what AMS supports is already on 15.4. The non-production servers for the IETF, like the Sandbox, are already on 15.4. Our hot standbys have been moved to 15.4. We haven't seen any issues, but we're going to wait until after the break to move the production services to 15.4 so that we have all of the resources for addressing any issues that might crop up with the applications available. So our plan is to upgrade IETF-A, where most of the services running, and IETF-X, where the remainder of the services that are visible to most of the community, like Zulip and notes.ietf.org and the wikis, are running during the first week of January, and RSCPA during the third week, if I remember correctly, again, because of resources at the RPC to be on hand should applications need touching. We're not expecting they would be. These upgrades are done on a live running server. The server doesn't have to be bounced in order to make the point upgrade. Any individual service would only be down long enough to make basically the service start cutover, which for most of these services is in a single digit number of seconds. So my next topic for discussion, and I'm getting less discussion than I expected, is scheduling for taking the data tracker offline to change its backend database to Postgres instead of MySQL. Our transition strategy, at least in our development environments, has been stable now for almost a month. It's been thoroughly tested. We've got very high confidence that we're going to run on Postgres at just fine, and out of the box it will be quite a bit more performant than what we're getting on top of MySQL, and then we're going to get tuning by the serious open source people that will move our performance up even more than that. As I've mentioned before, this is going to require a downtime that's going to be measured in tens of minutes. I'm estimating somewhere between 15 and 30. I think 30 is going to be on the long side. What we'll be doing during this time, MySQL and Postgres will both be stopped. We'll be taking a snapshot of the MySQL database, then running the migrations to move the data into MySQL, into Postgres, recondition it, and then start the service on top of my Postgres, on top of PostgreSQL. We are, as I mentioned earlier, still working through getting some of the utilities that we need onto the production environment in order to make this transition, PG Loader being the biggest. Hopefully by the end of this week we'll have a worked example of making the database transition on the Sandbox using a Dockerized PG Loader. I'm expecting that to work. Assuming it does, then I'm suggesting that we schedule this downtime for the 26th of January in the afternoon in the US. And that is a Thursday. So this would be in the quiet after an ISDG telechat. Just watching the data tracker logs for the last several months, this seems to have been a good place to deploy, good time of day to deploy new revisions of the data tracker, and I think it's probably one of the least disruptive weekday times to have this kind of an outage.
Did you check whether there is any interim at that point of time?
No, we looked and there is not. There are interims that
Perfect.
morning. Right, it's one of the reasons about afternoon US tends to not accrue interims because of the overlap with European time.
Very
Robert,
smart.
why
Thank you.
post an interim for the tools team during the planned outage? And just make it clear it's an outage. So anyone
Yeah.
looking at the upcoming things to not plan conflicts could notice that.
I will. Oh, yeah, it's a good idea. There's some details around that to make it to where it's very clear that it's not that it says something other than just tools. But we'll definitely send a note to IETF announce as well once I'm confident of a little more confident of the date than I am right now. We'll give people weeks of notice before we get to this. I'm not hearing, though, anybody running to the mic saying, oh, no, that date's terrible. Please don't do that to me. So I'm going to take that as a working plan, and we'll refine it as we get more information. All right, moving to the next topic. During IETF 115, we had several people suggest that the pop-ups that people had to click through in order to get into the Medico session, to get to the note session when using data tracker credentials to provide consent were disruptive and unnecessary. And after discussion with leadership, we believe that's true. We're moving to a model where if the service is at an IETF.org domain, we assume that you provided consent to use everything that the data tracker knows about you when you're using data tracker credentials, when you're using those services. If we have a service that's not in an IETF domain, we'll still provide the consent pop-ups. So people haven't object to, say, not send their email address off to GatherTown if we ever try to integrate GatherTown with the data tracker again, just as an example. The fun properties that we have in this mix are Medico. We already have Medico set up to use medico.ietf.org. Implementation detail, this is just CNAMEs to the host names at medico.com that were already being used. As people are going through this, they'll ultimately end up on a medico.com domain with that particular implementation detail at the very end. I believe the browser will show medico.com after the OIDC dance is over. But we have turned off the OIDC consent click-through for Medico already. Yang catalog is not an IETF.org domain, even though it's an IETF.org activity. At the moment, I've left it configured to require consent. Now, the only place that OIDC is used at Yang Catalog is for people that are logging into the administration console, so it's a very small number of people, folks like me and Eric and the contractors that are working on the project that would ever encounter this at all. so it's not something that affects the community at large. Thoughts, requests for change?
It's fine for me.
All right. So very, very quickly, I'm going to step up the pace now. We're 20 minutes into the call, going through the FYIs. If there are things in the FYIs that people have added detail to that they want to call out on the call, feel free to jump in and do so. But at a high level, we're on track for issuing an RFI about the infrastructure strategy early next year. We held our tools workshop. There are links to the notes that are being constructed about the tools workshop for publishing documents on the internet. It was a very lively conversation. I recommend that if you didn't participate, that you either go watch the YouTube recording or start reading through the notes. We've been working on the infrastructure of how IMAPD makes use of the data tracker's credentials. We made a big change around what version of Python it was based on. We're going to be making another big change soon on shifting it to use an API instead of trying to reuse the data tracker code base and underlying database directly. That was just a little bit too much code coupling. It was causing it, and it continues to cause us grief, so we're going to separate those a little bit more strongly. We began redirecting IDNets and RFC diff into author tools last week entirely, removing the www.ietf.org hosted instances of RFC diff and IDNets. We got a little bit of pushback on RFC diff because IDNets has a different diffing strategy in some cases, and some folks working on some large RFCs found that disruptive, so Kasara jumped in and made it so that you could, as an option, get the RFC diff output until we get ID diff to the point that it can replace RFC diff completely. Nick provided content. I think Nick's on. Yes, he's here. For the WikiJS deployment and our changes to our CI/CD tooling for the data tracker and soon the website itself. Nick, is there anything that you wanted to add other than what's typed in here? Anybody has any questions? Greg, do you have anything that you want to add about what we're doing for the track wiki migration to WikiJS?
Just to come back on the Nick's works on the droplets in DigitalOcean, is it easier to do this over DigitalOcean, or is it better to do it in a Docker locally on our laptop? Or is it, am I missing something?
So when you're doing just development in general, you want to run the instance on your laptop. What is at the DigitalOcean droplet is what's ultimately going to replace sandbox.ietf.org.
Got it. Thank you. So you can share the instance with other people, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So like Lars did that stuff with the new HTMLization, would have been a good example of something that he was running on his laptop, but he very quickly shouldn't have been.
Right. And we're set up now to where any branch like that we can just deploy into that droplet through CI/CD, punch of a button, right? All right, Greg, coming back to you. I think you had a question for the group about, are you still here, Greg? Saw you briefly at the beginning of the call. Looks like we may have lost him. No, he can follow up by email. Anybody have any questions about where we are with the Wiki.js transition, the content, moving the things that are in track into Wiki.js? Not hearing anything. I'll let you read about what's happening with the data tracker. The velocity's been incredibly high. Lots of big changes coming in frequently. We successfully deployed time zone aware. We are well on the way to successfully moving to Postgres. And I've got listed here the next big things that we're expecting to see. If at any time somebody knows of something that's coming along that we should be working on instead of these things, please let us know so that we get the items slotted in the right priority order. Kassar, do you have anything up? Go ahead.
So my comment is about the Yang catalog. I don't know quite where Yang catalog begins and Yang or ends and Yang begins, and whether or not this project, as managed by the tools team, includes Yang or not, or just I'm asking a political level question.
Yang itself is an open source tool that we use. We do not maintain it.
I
Does
thought
that
we had
answer your
contractors
question?
working on it at one point.
No, I don't believe that the contractors have ever gone into Yang itself.
No,
Okay.
but they publish some PR, right? The thing, Michael, the contractor pushed some PR to the Piang that was accepted by the Piang maintainer, which is an IETF guy, right?
Yeah.
But that's it.
Okay.
Doesn't go further.
I'm just trying to understand what parts, where we can ask for contractor help and where we have to, write our own PRs.
On Piang, I think you are left alone, right? Except if it's impacting maybe Yang catalog.
Well, but so in this case, it's impacting, IANA operations to do certain things. So that's where I don't know that's where I'm wondering about the boundary.
Is there an issue that's been raised at Yang that you can point to that would?
I could do that. And it's also tied up with the progress of a draft, which is supposed to be get out of Rob and Eric's world in the next days or so. But I'm just trying to I'm trying to understand the interaction at the technical level here, the political, who can do what. And I'm hearing that I should go debug the problem myself. That's fine.
Except now, if the problem is anything related to the yangcatalog.org itself, right? But then,
Right.
if
Well,
there's
Yang
an issue
catalog
about
is
the third
supposed to.
party, if there's an issue with the third party tools like Piang or Netconf or whatever, right? Conv, sorry. Yeah, then it's only a goodwill from the contractor, right?
Okay.
PR.
So it will affect Yang catalog because it's supposed to somehow present and display the SID data, and we've discussed that. But I'm just unclear what who's going to be responsible for that. So,
Well, Michael, to keep it, the model that I think an analogy that might help keep this straight is consider it to be in the same place that LiveXML is.
I don't think that helps me, but I'll take your point. Because I don't know what that is, and I've never used it, and so I don't know. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's something that XML to RSC, for example, fundamentally relies on, but we don't maintain it. It's the thing that it uses to manipulate the XML that's coming in. Kasari, do you have anything you wanted to add to what's in the notes about BibXML or author tools?
I would like to ask a question about some of the open issues. I see that there are dependencies on either Data Tracker or Relaton, and those seem to have been closed. They are closed, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of motion on the original issues that were opened by end users. For instance, issue 280. There were things that needed to be fixed in Data Tracker, and they're fixed. But I don't
Author
know.
tools or BibXML service, which issue 280?
BibXML service.
Okay. If you've got any that look like they need to, that look like they're not moving for lack of attention, just add a nudge as a comment into the issue. So,
Will do.
all right, Kasara, how about the website or XML to RSC? Or if anybody has any questions on those things.
I don't have anything else to add to what's in the notes, so
Okay. For what it's worth, Kasara, your audio was very, very, very faint when we were able to understand you, but it's not doing what you expected. Ryan, Mail Archive. Do we have Ryan? Yes, he's here.
Nothing to add to what's there.
Yes, I will throw in that we are, Jay, moving to replace the standalone set of reports that would capture things like number of subscribers to lists through these APIs. That progress is being made on that front. Eric, what about Yang Catalog? Anything else to discuss there?
Nothing to add. I guess at some point of time we will need to discuss the statement of work for next year. No.
Do you have a proposal started yet?
Not yet, to be honest. I would suggest that we kind of scale down. They make a huge amount of change. This time not always visible, but more about the stability and also some more change. So the budget should be lower. Now there is inflation in Europe and blah, 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 right? But for the price. But the amount of work should be lower.
All right.
So who should get the ball doing this, Robert? Is it you, Jay, or myself, or?
You know, I would suggest that the best thing that we could get is a summary of what we want, what the statement of work would be for the next year. You know, what new things we want,
Yeah, okay.
what the operational expectations are, and that Jay and I could pick it up with that in hand.
Okay, I will try to do it before the Christmas shutdown.
Awesome. All right. I think we can take the rest of what is in here as read. We're a little bit over 30 minutes in. I give back half an hour of your day unless somebody has something else that they'd like to dive into or to return to an earlier topic. Our next one of these
Well,
calls is the second week of January. I suspect there will be a fairly quick call then as well because of the end of year break in between this call and that one. If the format's still working well for everyone, we'll continue using the format that we use today. Other than that, for any of you that I don't see before next year, I hope that your end of year activities are very pleasurable. And I thank you very much for spending your time
Robert, can I,
having these
before you
discussions. Go ahead,
close the
Carson.
meeting, Michael already started alluding to this, but I think it's an interesting question that definitely I don't want answered today, but I just want to bring up. So if there is something like a live XML issue or a ping issue that actually is slowing us down in some form of tool support, and we don't have a natural candidate among the volunteers who can fix that. Um, do we have a plan for how to handle things like that?
So the working plan at the moment is we would either work with somebody that we have on staff or through our set of contractors to at least get some guidance to the community that is around that tool on wrestling them to the ground on how to fix it. Worked examples of things that we've done in the data tracker when infrastructure components have had issues that were showstoppers for us that the project we were relying on were not going to address quickly was to develop a framework to where we could patch those
Yes.
tools as they were installed. So at a very, very high level, this is the kind of approach that we have taken.
Yeah, but somebody has to actually find people who can do this and make sure that they actually are compensated for doing that, and so on and so on. And I'm not sure right now we have a way of doing that. I mean, this definitely should not be the normal way of getting tool support. But if there are circumstances that make it hard for the volunteers to actually do that kind of work, then it would be good to know we do have a fallback.
Well,
Can I?
you certainly have a place if the community as a whole is being affected to escalate and point out that there is an issue. And that we can then work on addressing it. Jay, you were starting to jump in?
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in and say, I mean, one of the things about having Nick and Kasara on board is that they're pretty much willing to try anything. So, you know, we do have a backup plan there of people who are willing to try anything. And where we've asked them to do that so far, that's been remarkably successful. So we have that as a possibility. We also have access to, there are plenty of mechanisms to have access to specialist contract programmers who do small amounts of things for us. So I'm not worried that we will struggle to get the resources for an urgent short-term fix. I think our issue about resources is more about longer term developmental things where we want somebody that's around for a long time, that learns it, is able to build it, you know, design and see the overall strategy about how things fit together. And that's something that, you know, hopefully we are working on, but still more slowly.
Thank you.
So that's what actually I wanted to say, is that I think that in this case with Piang, there's some what I perceive as architectural issues, possibly across the whole piece of software, that are revealing themselves as we try to do some things at the edge. And so I'm reluctant to do what I would probably would be a hot patch for me but then will probably be create a lot of technical debt that I probably won't even be aware of. And that's why I think I suspect that the problem I'm running into is a larger architectural issue, and that I would prefer that the changes wound up with someone with a longer view to what's going on. And so that's why I'm a bit, that's where my concern came from, right?
Okay, that's kind of similar to what I was asking. Yeah, we certainly should discuss what we actually want to be done first before we engage in the issue I brought up.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I think my question has been answered.
Thank you, Karsten. Unless anybody has anything else, enjoy the end of the year, and we'll talk with you as things go along.